Here we go. Are you ready to understand why tangent makes the graph that it does? The period for tangent, instead of being 2 pi divided by b, is simply pi divided by b. We won't worry about a horizontal shift. We won't do that. We don't really need to. I used to, but it really isn't necessary. And so now we discover the graph of tangent. We know it repeats itself every pi units. How many quadrants is that? 2. So therefore, we don't divide it up into 4 parts. We divide it into 2 parts. We talked about sine being the y value and cosine being the x value. What is tangent? Y over x. So look at 0 radians. What is y divided by x for 0 radians? It is 0. So I start at 0. For tangent, yes. And I move to pi over 2. What's y divided by x there? Undefined. And if something's undefined, we draw a vertical asymptote. A line that the graph approaches but never touches. I move over to pi. What is y divided by x at pi? 0. I'm going to go to negative pi. So that would be right here. What is y divided by x right here? 0. I'm going to go to negative pi over 2, which is right here. What is y divided by x there? Undefined. So you have vertical asymptote. Yep, Alex is asking a good question. He says, how can we have these vertical asymptotes, are going same direction? Because he's thinking about our rational functions. Watch and you'll see. 0 to pi over 2, that's the first quadrant. Pi over 2 to pi, that's the second quadrant. Negative pi to negative pi over 2, that's the third quadrant. And then this is the fourth quadrant. Somebody tell me, in the first quadrant, is tangent positive or negative? So therefore, it sits above the x-axis. How about in the fourth quadrant, is it positive or negative? So it sits below the x-axis. And therefore, the graph of tangent has this kind of shape going on. That's what it looks like. Very good. So we're going to show you how it's slightly different. So it's very similar to y equals x cubed, or a cubic function. We're going to show you how it is just slightly different. Let's try to get this one example in before the bell goes. What is the period for this guy? Remember, I take pi divided by b. So you're going to get 1. I mark 1 and negative 1. I divide it into how many parts? Why 2 parts? Because it takes 2 quadrants to repeat itself. And what we just learned about tangent is it's equal to 0 at those period spots. And what happens halfway in between? Vertical asymptotes halfway in between. We'll pick up with that when you get back. Here we go. All right, good times. We divided up tangent. We divided up, and now we know the tangent starts down and finishes up. And so this is how it goes. It looks like that. Jackson brought up this point about a cubic. I just want you to know that if we look at y is equal to x cubed, don't draw this, but what's different is that, and I exaggerated that, it flattens out at 0. See how that happens? The blue is probably a better representation. Tangent doesn't completely flatten out. So a cubic, first of all, it goes forever in the direction to the right and the direction to the left. And then it flattens out at 0. The tangent graph, it doesn't go forever to the right and the left. It you know, it can't get past this 1/2 mark right here. That asymptote, it will just continue to follow it up. And then when it passes through this spot right here, it has a slope of 1. Whatever the number is in front, that's the slope that it has as it passes through. You don't have to try to show that. Just understand that it's not flat as it passes through. It has slope. So what? You're an idiot. All right. Here we go. Cotangent of x. How is cotangent different than tangent? Okay, they're reciprocal. So instead of y over x, it's x over y. So let's consider that. First of all, it's going to repeat itself every pi unit. So I have pi, negative pi, pi over 2, negative pi over 2. Awesome. But now let's discover kind of how the graph takes shape here. We're going to do x divided by y. So if you do x divided by y at 0, what do you get? Undefined. So therefore, it's not equal to 0 at this spot, but rather it's undefined. Vertical asymptote. So instead of starting with a 0, it starts out with a vertical asymptote. Then I move over to pi over 2. Yeah, if you do x divided by y, you get 0 over 1 or 0. Move over to pi, and you get x divided by y is undefined. And so it's opposite from tangent in that way. Then let's understand the graph of cotangent. This represents the first quadrant, 0 to pi over 2. That's 0 degrees to 90 degrees, first quadrant. Is cotangent positive or negative in the first quadrant? It's positive. How about second quadrant? Negative. So that's why cotangent starts up and finishes down. You guys can have time to work. The assignment is short. So if we flip back to this page right here, I'm now going to graph negative 2 tangent of x. Negative 2 tangent of x. What is the period? Pi. Well, hi there. How are you? They missed you. They may not make a strong statement for them, but they definitely missed you. Okay. Yep. All right. So is tangent equal to 0 at the period, or is it undefined at the period? 0 at the period. So every pi units, I put a 0 in place. So I put a dot, that's where it crosses through. What do I do halfway in between? Vertical asymptote, that's where it's undefined. Will this graph start down and finish up, or start up and finish down? Start up and finish down. Why? Because it's negative. That will create a vertical flip. Letter C, what's the period? How would you get 4 pi? So this is cotangent of 1/4 x. That's what x over 4 is 1/4 x. So in order to determine the period, we take pi and divide it by 1/4. As Henrik said, you multiply them by 4 and when you divide by the fraction. So 4 pi. So I mark off 4 pi. What do I do then? Divide in half, y in half. That tangent repeats itself every 2 quadrants as opposed to 4 quadrants. Now what do I mark? Right at this spot, do I make a 0 or do I make a vertical asymptote? Vertical asymptote, because it's cotangent. And wherever I have a period, I mark that. Put zeros halfway in between. You tell me, does it start down, finish up, or start up, finish down? Yeah, cotangent starts up, finishes down. And we have the last one. -2 cotangent of pi over 3x. Period is going to be pi divided by pi over 3. How do I do pi divided by pi over 3? Multiply by 3 over pi. What happens? Pi is canceled. I'm left with. So the period is 3. Mark off 3, -3, 3 halves, -3 halves. Now what? Asymptotes at the period. Zero halfway between. Does it start up and finish down or start down and finish up? Down and finish up because it's negative, it reflects. Right now, we're set to test on Monday. I told you I'd give you a homework cover sheet today. I lied because I'm a liar. So I will give it to you tomorrow. Sorry, Hannah.